in keeping with the theme, we arrive to the next topic, which is how to tackle the press in case of a mishap by Dr. Neeraj. Who needs no introduction, Dr. Neeraj Nagpal is consultant physician and GI endoscopist, chairman and managing trustee of Medico's Legal Action Group.
Can it be seen now?
Yeah, that's right.
This is ultimately a recipe for physician burnout. And when the hospital organization is diligently performing root cause and identification and analysis to prevent future errors, the physician usually is left alone. This kind of thing has a very, very negative impact on the doctors. And if we want to prevent that, we have to take steps proactively at a time when this situation is still evolving. The problem is as yet unrecognized in India, and hence there is an unsympathetic attitude towards the second victim, which is the doctor. As has already been stated by Mr. Bajpai, there are multiple fora besides the consumer courts where a doctor can be dragged and allegations made. But what is the worst fora is the media trial. This is the place where even Asaram Bapu had to go before the Supreme Court and ask for a ban on media coverage, because media trial is something which is the most detrimental for a doctor who has diligently built up his practice on the basis of his reputation and sincerity. The harm caused to a doctor made by an allegation against him, he wastes his time, wasted in preparation of the court case, wasted in dealing with the police, wasted in court before state commission, money, the compensation which is awarded, legal charges, loss of future earning, reputation through the news reports, and mental trauma and harassment. But what damages us the most is the bad publicity, which is the fallout of the adverse newspaper headlines. This is an incalculable cost for somebody in practice. Doctors can also suffer physical disease, and sometimes these newspaper headlines affect the children of doctors who are studying in school. I still remember a case of Dr. Sanjay Saluja. He was in Chandigarh and he had applied a plaster cast on the leg of a boy. His own son was the boy's classmate. And the entire school, this thing, the boy ended up with an amputation. And the entire school, the newspapers used to carry this news nearly for 45 news items on front page. These were consecutively coming over the month or 1.5 months. The children of the doctor stopped going to school because of the harassment they faced. And I cannot still forget their faces. Ultimately, the doctor left the country. The doctor is under pressure, comes under pressure after these newspaper headlines to settle for an out-of-court settlement. This is another major problem. And this out-of-court settlement is something which is extremely useless, if you ask me, and it gives you a false sense of security and later creates more problems than solves them. This compromise, this out-of-court settlement also does not help if a criminal case has been filed or if a criminal case is planned, because this kind of a compromise, the criminal case is usually the person whose allegation has been made against versus Union of India or versus State of Punjab or whosoever, and the compromise may not necessarily withdraw the criminal complaint, and this is well established. So out-of-court settlement in principle should be avoided, and the pressure which is created for out-of-court settlement with these press reports is something which is to be avoided. The news reports come up with their own hypothesis. In this case, what was highlighted in the news reports was something which was totally absurd, but the headline catches the public eye. And when you have to deal with media in a crisis, the definition of media has now been broadened, and organizations not only have to deal with traditional news outlets such as newspapers, magazines, and broadcast stations, but they also must address an array of cable channel, news channels, websites, and bloggers. This media trial violates an accused person's right to life with dignity and personal liberty guaranteed under Article 21 of the Constitution, and also amounts to interference in administration of the justice. Although news channels need to scrupulously follow the program code as per Cable Television Network Regulation Act, but this usually is a toothless kind of a tiger. There is no statutory mechanism to regulate the content which is generated on electronic media. Like the Press Council of India is there for regulating the newspapers or the print media in the country, there is no such regulatory body per se for the electronic media. And look at the kind of headlines which are published. This was one of the prominent Punjab Kesari newspaper, is a very prominent newspaper in this region, and it carries an article कि महिलाओं को डॉक्टर के पास अकेले ना भेजें. What kind of message this sends is something all of us need to strive to correct. So when things go wrong, what should be done? You should assume that the press will be approached. What Dr. Geetender said, supposing there is a death in hospital which is unexpected, assume that the press will be approached. So you prepare a press release and have copies of the same with a short statement focusing on sympathy with the family and stressing that best possible care was provided. Include the information about formation of an independent inquiry committee comprising of doctors not directly involved in treatment of the patient, or better still, if you have doctors from outside the hospital, part of the independent inquiry committee, to investigate the incident so that such incidents could be prevented in future. And this message should be going within the press release. Inform the insurers of the incident. Dr. Geetender has already covered this. And always remember, when a story breaks of a catastrophe which has happened in a hospital, a medical accident which has happened in a hospital, reporters will report that story with or without your help. For them, it is being first to report, and they will report whether they know, even if the information is sketchy. The details, they will always say, will follow. Instead of shutting reporters out and opening the door to speculation, offer accurate and available information. You will appear responsive, credible, and concerned. It is most important to respond quickly. Even if there is little to say, when a hospital does not respond, the reporters wonder if they have something to hide. If you cannot release any information, take control of the story by explaining why. By offering an explanation, you appear responsive and cooperate. And the media can be quite inventive in the manner in which they contact you, and this may come in a variety of forms. They may contact you via email or phone, through social media, arriving at your home or place of work, through colleagues, friends, family members. All these approaches may catch you off guard. And should doctors pay to suppress the news? You'll be surprised, but I have received a number of queries in this regard. And usually at night, when some newspaper reporter is asking a doctor to pay a certain amount, failing which negative news will be published the next day. So of course, this is something which none of us should do. And how to prepare? Appoint a nominated lead in your team to be the first point of call for all media inquiries to help ensure a consistent approach. Brief the team so they know what they can and they can't say to reporters and patients whom may have seen the media coverage. Ensure that the receptionist and person answering the phone knows there could be media calls and who to put the call through to. Try to maintain a professional composure in front of a camera queue. They will film and get a picture which is likely to be used alongside any news stories they publish. So make sure you convey a professional image. Focus on where you're going. Do not try to look directly into the camera. Do not cover your face. Even smiling may convey a wrong impression. And remember, this is the image which will be viewed by the public. So a calm, professional, dignified appearance is the most appropriate. Be prepared for calls on your mobile from reporters at around evening, 8 p.m., 9 p.m. when their deadlines approach. Avoid responding straight away. Ask them information on the exact issue on which they would like you to comment, along with their deadline. What is their deadline? Carefully record name, phone number, email ID, fax number of the reporter. Reply calmly, preferably from the written statement press release which you have already prepared. Tell him to receive your fax or email immediately and send the press release. This press release should have been prepared in advance with inputs from seniors, medical legal experts, and lawyers. It is wise to keep statements succinct and factual. Not more than 150 words is a general guide. Column inches are limited and lengthy statement is likely to be edited, which could distort the meaning or alter the emphasis which you are trying to make. When next day morning you open the newspaper, still take a tablet of sorbitrate, because what you have tried to convey may not be what has been published. Send a rejoinder next day based on this news report and arrange for a rebuttal of allegations to be printed with view of local Indian Medical Association. You can also have to tackle bad online reviews. Doctors struggling with bad reviews can find some solace in the words of this marketing guru and best-selling author Neil Patel. He has said very clearly, leave it alone. Do not talk about it. When you deal with it, it just adds more fuel to fire. Similarly, another expert says it really is better to ignore it, because the more you address it, the more people start talking about it, the more it grows. The Information Technology Act, Section 66A, which awarded punishment for sending offensive messages through communication service, etc., any person using the computer resource or communication device. This, of course, has now been struck down by the Supreme Court's order dated 24th March 2015. And to sue a person for defamation, you have to use the civil or the criminal law now. News organizations, if you are dealing with the reporter, rarely will allow the interviewed to review the entire text before publication. Journalists may be willing to read back or email quotes, so interview subjects can check on them, but this is very rare. Anything you say could end up in print or on air, so there is nothing off record. When you're talking to a reporter, even if you say this is off the record, it carries no meaning. Take time to prepare your message. Use plain language that cannot be misconstrued or taken out of context. This is in case you do not have a pre-prepared press release. And as I said, nothing is off record, so don't be casually make any comment. This is another major problem, that sometimes people go into a shell during a crisis, and this is not wise. Saying no comment is not going to make the incident go away or the media. Instead, organizations should be forthcoming with information about specific incident, provide any relevant background information that will help the media put the situation in proper context. Somebody has to mute the speaker which is on. The process of dealing with the media during a major crisis should be managed by a crisis management team. Honesty really is the best policy. The media is interested in accurate, truthful information and something that will be of interest to their readerships. If you don't know the answer, indicate that the information you don't know at this point and hope to provide it later. Have open transparency, be as open and communicative as possible. And to deal with press in a crisis, you need to plan for crisis management, including media relations. The standard operating procedures, which we always say doctors should practice for violence and for a crisis like a sudden death, should include media relations, how and who is going to manage that. Having a plan in place for how to handle a crisis and the accompanying media coverage rather than dealing with it when it occurs. Think through options and course of action before you need it. Those involved in managing media dealings in a crisis should include the CEO and the representatives from legal and public relations departments. The biggest mistake is failure to plan. Without planning, you can't respond as quickly and you won't be prepared for what to say and do in advance. This has to take the form of a quarterly drill of a standard operating procedure. There is something called role play which you can do. You decide on this particular day, we are going to plan for crisis management. There is an expired injection which has been given, followed by death. or a young patient's death after normal delivery, or gangrene following IV infusion resulting in amputation, wrong blood transfusion. Any such role play will help you plan what you will do if this kind of a situation happens. Train your spokespeople. The person who's talking to the media should be someone who has gone through some type of training on dealing with the media and providing what they need. In a crisis, many organizations automatically put their CEO in front of the media. But if the chief executive or other designated spokesperson isn't comfortable or familiar with reporters, cameras, and microphones, this could backfire. All spokespeople need to be trained to deal with friendly interviews and in-your-face ambush interviews. It is not something which is ingrained. Establish an ongoing relationship with the press. For hospitals, larger hospitals, it is always better to do this in some form of advertisements or some form of constant interaction with the media, giving them reports which are positive in nature. Organizations that keep media outlets such as local newspapers and TV stations informed on an ongoing basis will be less likely to have misunderstandings when a crisis arises. They might even rely on the media for help in disseminating information. And as I said earlier, do not wait for an incident to happen. Plan beforehand. If you have an incident at one of our facilities, we need the media to get the word out because the persons themselves cannot do that. And do not treat media as an enemy. It is easier to say these things when we are talking of a corporate hospital or a corporate organization. This becomes very difficult for small and medium healthcare establishments who do not have the budgets to deal with the media on a regular basis, to engage them on a regular basis. But this is what is the expert advice. This is common response and a poor one, experts say. But oftentimes, the more an organization shuts out the media, the more reporters and editors speculate on what happened and what's still happening during the crisis. Reporters will look for sources inside and outside the hospital who might provide inaccurate or outdated information. And treating the media as an enemy is negative. Even if things are not reported like you want them to be, it doesn't mean the relationship is broken at that point. And do not let the media be the only source of news. It is important that organizations rely on other things, communicating with your employees, using any employees' newsletters. Don't forget the bloggers. You can have some bloggers on your roles who can spread the word around. And the people who work for you must be kept apprised as much as is reasonable during a crisis. They all have associates who want to know what is going on when there is a crisis. They should not give out any wrong information which comes out in the media, and remind them of the protocol regarding who to refer to in case a reporter contacts them. Keep calm, carry on. Unfortunately, some individuals may try to bait you by making comments that are intended to make you angry. Losing your temper will make you appear immature or even incapable. Don't panic. You know your business, you know your facts, be courteous and polite, listen to exactly what the reporter is asking, avoid joking. This is something which could backfire later. And don't lose your temper. Use social media in a crisis. Many a times, negative reports coming in your social media, you yourself may not respond, but you can have a person in your team who gives a polite response to even negative social media posts. Respond to this criticism. Do not get upset or engage in disputes with whoever is posting the social media post, and have a thinking in the person who's dealing with that, which will not be you yourself, that customer or public is always right, and give a polite answer. However, you may be tempted to respond by giving out actual facts. Please remember, you are still obliged with confidentiality you have to maintain regarding your patient. Because even if the same patient may have created a problem for you in the press, you still are bound by the confidentiality clause with your patient. And there are these sting operations which are occasionally conducted by the press, and it can create havoc, especially in TOHA, Transplantation of Human Organs Act cases, and even in laboratory investigations and so on and so forth. After a crisis, it is essential to bring the involved hospital staff together to talk about what happened. This not only offers a cathartic element by allowing staff to talk freely about the situation, but it also is a valuable method for improving your incident response in the future. You need to ask certain questions during this debriefing. Was communication clear? Were roles and responsibilities understood? Was situational awareness maintained? Was workload distribution equitable? Was task assistance requested? Were errors made or avoided? Were resources available? What went well? What should be improved? These are some things which can be done before crisis, as I already said. In summary, practice a standard operating procedure and role play even when no crisis is there, and this should be done on a regular basis. Prepare a press release during crisis. Have pre-designated official to answer queries, engage with the press, have designated officer to reply to social media. After the crisis, debrief your staff. Thank you so very much.